Stuhlberg. Hello. Welcome to the latest edition of Shop Talk, aka Imagine Wednesdays, aka Writers Speak. Gathered here on YouTube are faculty members, current students, admitted students, and lovers of good writing. Behind the scenes is our tech genius, Frank. Let me describe the format. Our reader, Kate Mullin, will read for 10 to 15 minutes, and then we'll talk, a combination of your questions from the chat feed and a couple of mine. So let me tell you a little bit about Kate. Caitlyn, Mullin, and I began working together in September of 2016, which is amazing to me because I feel as if we have been writing friends for our entire lives. She is a consistently imaginative and interesting writer of fiction and reader of fiction, an excellent human, generous and smart and kind, entirely deserving of every good thing that comes her way. A graduate of the MFA program here and of our post-MFA novel incubator, BookEnds, Caitlyn Mullin represents the very best of what our community produces. We are here today to celebrate the publication of her wonderful first novel, Please See Us. So please join me in welcoming the wonderful Caitlyn Mullin.
Oh my gosh, thank you, Susie. It's gonna make me cry starting off. Okay, so I'll start off by reading from the prologue of the book before jumping into another short section. Here's the book. Okay. By the second weekend, dead women laid out like tallies in the stretch of marsh just behind the Sunset Motel. They're so close to each other that their fingers nearly touch. The women can see everything with perfect clarity now, the man's entire design available to them as though they had thought of it themselves. By the end of 8 weeks' time, there will be 5 more women. He plans to use the city's 7 women, 7 warnings. Not so lucky. The motel sits on the western border of Atlantic City, where stretches of salt marsh buffer the space between land and ocean. Casinos line the shores on the eastern edge of town, along the boardwalk, and to the north, where pleasure boats slip in and out of the marina, or dock long enough for a bottle of wine, a bit of sun, a swim. At night, the skyline is gapped, like a child's smile. Half of the casinos have shut down and their lights are turned out. The empty buildings hulk against the shoreline, mammoth and spectral as shipwrecked cruise liners. In death, the women are still dressed to walk the streets, to attract clients with a slice of leg, cleavage, to mime desire with the cant of their hips, the toss of their hair, dressed to be undressed. Their jewelry glints in the sun, gold hoop earrings, and the delicate chains of ankle bracelets. Charms in the shape of 4-leaf clovers, a pair of cherries, a cat's head. A stack of cheap metal bangles, the gilt coming off in tiny flakes. There's longing in the way their hands seem to reach toward one another, the aching almost of it. Bruises bloom on the skin of their arms, delicate blues and greens that could have been painted with watercolor. Except for their necks, which are marked with purple rings, the water seething in and out of the tide means they won't be preserved for long. Already, dense, iridescent clumps of greenhead flies tickle along their limbs, their cheeks, their scalps. The flies' thick, segmented wings like stained glass. Each day brings a new hope that someone will find them. Planes fly banners over the beach advertising Corona. The pilots loop back over the marsh but never look down. Other days, an employee from the motel rattles a bag of recycling to the dumpster. Some nights, a couple stops in the motel's parking lot to look in the back of a rusted-out Ford Explorer. The car rocks on its frame for a little while, and after it goes still, the man ambles out to light a joint. Sometimes the woman squats on the edge of the marsh to piss behind the cover of the reeds. The women call to her, the shush of the wind through the grass like a whisper. Look, they try to say. Look, please see. Cars and buses thrum past on the Black Horse Pike. Trucks delivering cuts of filet mignon and ribeye to the casino steakhouses, or vans of fresh laundry for the hotels. Sheets and pillowcases that have been boiled clean, napkins and tablecloths stiff with starch. At one point or another, the women in the marsh have wished for that kind of cleansing, a way to scour their secrets away, their past rolled down the drain. The man has turned their heads so that they both look in the same direction, east, toward the lights of Atlantic City. They have been placed there to watch, to warn. Their eyes are open. They wait. Okay. And the next section I'll read from briefly is told from the point of view of Clara. Clara is a teenage boardwalk psychic and recent high school dropout. She lives with her Aunt Des above a shop on the boardwalk, and they've been having trouble making their rent since the tourist industry has declined and they don't have as many people to either con out of their money or to do their fortunes to. On Sunday morning, Des and I sat in beach chairs in front of the shop, waving paper fans at our faces. A feral cat crept up from under the boardwalk and splayed itself in the shade of our awning. I poured it a small dish of milk, but it wouldn't drink, and the milk curdled in the heat. A middle-aged couple in matching khaki shorts approached from the candy store. A plastic sack of saltwater taffy dangled from the woman's hands. She paused in front of the doorway and stared into the shop. "Come in," Des called to them in the voice she used for clients, honeyed and sweet, though she couldn't always keep it up. The gruff, cigarette-roughened Des eventually slipped through. "Come find out about your future. We do tarot readings, palm readings, anything you like." The woman leaned into the man's shoulder, whispered something in his ear. He shook his head, took her hand, and they walked on. I watched the sweat stain on the back of his gray t-shirt move down the boardwalk until they disappeared. "I'll tell you what's in his future. Heart disease. You see the gut in him?" Des said. I tried to hide my smile. Des was probably the last person who should be calling anyone out for a lack of self-control. After all, the pills kept her thin. "Hey, Des, have you heard anything about that missing girl?" "What girl? There's always missing girls." "The one whose poster's all over town. She was here." "Apparently." Des shrugged. "Someone's wasting a lot of paper, if you ask me." "Her uncle came in for a reading. He wanted to know if I could help." "Shit, what did you tell him?" "Nothing much, that I could feel her presence in the air." That had been true. There was a feeling, a pressure on my throat, tears that built behind my eyes, and I convinced myself that they meant something, that I should care about what happened to her. Maybe that's why I stole a bandana. I wanted to keep a piece of her close. "You don't know anything, do you?" I asked Des. "Sometimes," Des had said, "girls showed up at the club looking for jobs as dancers. Runaways, girls fresh off the bus from farm towns in Pennsylvania, the smell of hay and manure lingering in their hair. Girls who hadn't heard that any glitz had rubbed off Atlantic City years ago. Zilch, though she better not trot out that young ass looking for a job. I'm probably about to be canned any day now." "You say that every week, Des." "Gets more and more true all the time. You should probably be more worried." "We've still got this." I spread my hands to indicate the front of the shop. "You know that's not enough. It hasn't been. Not for a long time. Nothing good gets its due here. Not anymore. I mean, you're practically the real goddamn deal, and we still can't pay the rent on time." Des was right. We got word-of-mouth clients for readings every few weeks, but people didn't seem to want to know their futures anymore. They came to Atlantic City because they wanted to escape from the unrelenting predictability of it all. Their boring jobs, their indifferent partners, the same meals they microwaved night after night and ate in front of the TV. I couldn't blame them for that. "We need to be more proactive," I said. "We should try the spa tomorrow. I think those are our people. Those ladies who pay $200 to let someone rub lotion on them with a bunch of hot rocks on their backs. They should be able to cough up $10 for a tarot reading here and there." "We got blacklisted there, remember, little miss? They said they'd call security if we came back." I crossed my arms. Last time, Des and I paid $20 each for a day pass to the spa and spent a few hours offering to read cards for women who came into the lounge. We made $50 off a woman from Binghamton before someone turned us in, and an employee in a dark suit demanded that we leave. "They didn't mean that," I said. "What we need is to make friends with someone on the inside. Someone on the staff will work with us. Let's just try it. It beats sitting here sweating, my goddamn cellulite sticking to this stupid chair." "You don't have cellulite, Des." She turned to look at me, slid her sunglasses down the bridge of her nose. "You know when you look like her the most?" I didn't need to ask who she meant. Des almost never talked about my mother, so when she did, I tended to hold my breath. I could count the facts I knew about her in 2 hands. She liked mint chocolate chip ice cream. She and Des moved here in 1987 from Newark after their mother died. She had visions too, just like me, and she left for California when I was a baby to become a psychic to the stars. I received letters from her every year on my birthday until I turned 12. The only other piece of her I had was the book she left behind. a heavy old hardcover with brown pages called The Wisdom of Tarot. I like to read it before I fell asleep, so that some of its magic, some of her, might sift through my dreams. You make the same face as my sister when you tell a lie. What kind of things did she lie about? I asked, but Des didn't answer, and I watched her stare out past the boardwalk and beach to the thick blue line where the ocean met the horizon. The air above it shimmered in the heat. I'll stop there.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. That was just wonderful. So, Kate, you know, the New York Times Book Review called this novel spellbinding, and I think it really is. There is a kind of a wonderful connection between magic and reality, and I wonder if you can talk a little bit about how about the genesis of the novel, how, you know, the seed idea that the novel was built from, and what the original idea was. I mean, I have a memory of the original 40 pages for only 4 years ago. But I'd love for you to talk about how the book grew from the original idea.
Yeah, so the book was inspired by true events. I grew up outside of Atlantic City, went to high school there, and shortly after I graduated from high school, the bodies of 4 women were found in a marsh behind an Atlantic City motel. And the crime is still unsolved. No one knows what happened to these women, and it sort of fell out of the focus, you know, both in town and never really received any national attention, as far as I know. And so that just always stuck with me. But the novel, when I actually sat down to write it, my first impulse was to write from the point of view of a young woman coming back to town from New York City after her personal life and professional life has fallen apart. And she comes back to Atlantic City to recover from a breakup, and gets this job in Atlantic City Spa. And that did end up becoming the point of view of my character, Lily. But it took a little while to bring Clara into the fold. It took a little while to bring the voices of the Jane Doe characters into the fold. Originally, the novel had just been conceived of from that one point of view that you first saw, which was eventually the voice of Lily, and then evolved from there, because I realized Lily just wouldn't have all of the information that she needed from her point of view to tell the story in an interesting way. So those other points of view came in as the book evolved.
Yeah, and there, I mean, in particular, the chorus of the dead women is so beautiful that it's just, you know, I can't imagine the book without those voices, and you know, at all, you know. And no, I just love it. And along the chat, people are talking about how Paul is talking about how clear and immersive the writing is, and how it puts you under a spell, and Paige is saying precise and beautiful. And I think all of those things are very true. And the next question that I want to ask you, and feel free, people in chat, to ask questions if you would like, but the next question I would like to ask is about the question of violence and women, and how women are used and portrayed in fiction, and how it's my feeling that you were very careful about how you factored in the kind of the acts of violence in the book, and it's not you know, the sort of non-pornographic way that you handled violence. I wonder if you can speak to how you approached that and what you were thinking about as you did that.
Yeah, that was a huge part of the project for me, just because, you know, coming in, when you write a book like this that opens with the bodies of women being found somewhere, being forgotten, you know, violence has clearly been done to these women. I brought that awareness of like what a large part of our culture and the entertainment we consume in our culture is focused on those borderline pornographic depictions of violence against women. So much of the media and the books we consume are focused on those kinds of acts. But I wanted to use the book to push back against those portrayals a little bit. Yes, I mean, this is a novel about the murders of women, but I wanted to treat those women with dignity as much as I could, which so important part of that was telling the women's stories before they died and giving a sense of who they were before they were murdered, who they, what they wanted in life, who they were leaving behind. And so that's where those choruses of the Jane Does come in, where we have a sense of what these women wanted. And as far as depicting the violence, I was really selective because as the book progresses, there are more murders, but I didn't want to necessarily show the murders on the page every time. Just sort of informed by the philosophy that the more attention we pay to how women, in these stories die, the more we, are privileging that information over what's maybe more important about the women, which is what they did when they were alive.
Right. I mean, in a way, because of doing that, you've sort of reconceived what it means to be a participant in the world of a thriller. I mean, it's so compelling and gripping, and yet you're not adhering to the kind of the expected path of that kind of story. And do you think that this kind of thriller-like book is going to be where you continue to work?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, I'm currently driving myself crazy by working on 2 books at the same time. One that is maybe more of the thriller, and it's set in the ballet world at a school for teenage dancers in upstate New York, and they have a sort of mystery on their hands about the origins of their school and some of the events that they've seen, and they're working to uncover the truth about this institution where they've spent their young lives so far, and they have to interrogate what's important to them and, is what they sacrifice in order to fulfill their ambitions really worth it? But all within maybe like a noirish kind of thriller mode. And the other book that I'm crazily working on at the same time is less of a thriller. It's an expansion of a story I actually wrote when I was in the program, where a teenage girl's mother is on the first mission to Mars, and it switches between the girl and the mother's points of view during that mission.
Oh, that sounds great. And boy, I mean, that takes a lot of energy. And you made this other thing this year, and I wonder if you can talk a little bit about having both a baby and a book emerge at the same time.
Yeah. So it's funny because before I had a baby, I felt like the only conversations I was reading or hearing about around making art and motherhood were negative ones, and about how children would completely interfere with your ability to concentrate on your work. And I mean, it's definitely, you have new limits on your time for sure, and you're now on someone else's schedule for most of your day. But I think it made me a lot more efficient. Like right now, if I have 2 hours to work in the morning, I am working. I am not 4 browser tabs open, looking at, dresses in Anthropology and scrolling through Twitter and telling myself I'm just warming up and dipping my toes in. It's if I have that, 2 hours, I am sitting down and I'm writing. Right. And it's also been sort of nice to have this small person in my life who couldn't care less that I'm working on a book or publishing a book. It's I sit here up in my own head about what's happening. Is my book going to sell well? Is this next book going to be okay? And it's sort of a relief to just have this, this baby who just wants me to play with her and, do stupid dances and make her laugh. It gets you out of your own head in a nice way. for me, at least.
Yeah, I remember the period when my kids were very small as being one of my most productive periods. Yeah, there's something really lovely about that obligation in both directions. So Sally Martell, who you remember, I'm sure, asks if you could talk a little bit about your journey toward publication, like how that came about for you.
Yeah, so I wrote the book as my MFA thesis, and I met my agent through the program the spring, really like the spring after I technically finished my coursework and turned in the thesis and, you know, graduated. And she gave me a lot of edits. She had some really great ideas about how to edit the book for publication, but I did have to, you know, it was a pretty big undertaking at that time. But I was gung-ho. I thought that her suggestions were really smart. So I essentially, once, you know, we signed on to work together, I went away for this summer and just, you know, nose to the grindstone, worked on those edits. And we had a couple more back and forth sessions. And then by that fall, we were ready to send the book out. And we sent the book out to a pretty big list of editors. And, you know, of course, you don't hear from everyone. And when an editor's interested, you have a phone call with them. So I had a couple of those initial phone calls, and you sort of figure out who you might jibe with, and you wait and bite your nails to see if they're going to offer on the book. So then the book received a couple offers, and I got to choose which editor I wanted to work with, and had a couple of follow-up conversations to really be sure about that decision. And then it landed with, you know, an editor I felt was really passionate about the book and really saw what I was trying to do. A couple of the editors I talked to maybe wanted some changes that I think would shift the identity of the book in ways that I wasn't totally on board with. And then, you know, the editor I ended up working with just got the identity of the book. So I was lucky in that way.
That's terrific. So as a follow-up question, and this is, so when you started working with your agent, you went through a whole set of revisions with her, and those were revisions that were sort of prepping the book to sell. And then with the editor, you went through a whole other set of revisions, which were prepping the book to publish. And did you feel always that you were working along a sort of continuum and refinement, or were there often new ideas coming in?
I would say when my agent and I were working together, there were still some open-ended things that I felt like I could get new ideas into the book. And a lot of that process too, when I was still working with her to prepare it to submit, a lot of that still felt really generative, and there seemed to be more room to change a lot of things. And then it did eventually, after that, feel, you know, by the time I was working with my editor, feel like a continuous process of refinement. The editor's suggestions, because it's a multi-point of view novel, were a lot of times focused on differentiating those voices a little more. A lot of the characters tended to observe the same kinds of things, where their observations fell into the same category. Whereas, for example, my editor suggested, you know, maybe this character, because she's interested in art, observes mostly visual things. Because, you know, Clara is interested in money or needs money, she's observing class differences a little more. So fine tuning, I think by the time we got to the stage with my editor and we were working together, was a little more, and then like, you know, fine tuning on that continuum.
That's wonderful. Great. That's fabulous. Do we have other questions from the chatting people, or looks like they only say wonderful things. Nobody says, tell me.
No
solve
one's
my problems. So I want to thank you, Kate. It's just wonderful to see you even in this crazy way, and love the book, and you're wonderful, and I just congratulate you so much on this great accomplishment. So
thank you so much. And thank you for having me. And I wish I could see everyone in person, obviously, but one day we'll all get together again. But yeah, thank you so much, Susie.
Thank you.
Bye, guys. Thank you.